This is the warning.
There is some terrible news that is unfolding in Utah, and that is that the MAGA activist, the founder of the youth organization Turning Point USA, has been shot. Charlie Kirk has been shot in Utah. Let me say that this is a terrible crime. It is an act of reprehensible violence, and it should be condemned unequivocally and directly by every American, but especially by all of those who stand opposed to the descending curtain of fascism in America. This act of violence stands the shooter on the side of what we must be against the depravity, against the violence, against the evil that the Trump regime has manifested, and that Charlie Kirk misguidedly, in my view, supported and endorsed. But in this country, we believe unequivocally and without exception in the freedom of speech and conscience and thought. And this act of violence directed by a Democratic activist will be used by the demagogues of the MAGA movement, the propagandists, to justify the use of force and the imposition of control by government authority against the citizen, because at the core of the MAGA ideology is a victim and grievance industry that has told people for a generation that they are victims and that they are hunted. And today, the evidence of that was laid down with bloody, perfect clarity. And so a political leader of an opposition that I disdain and detest has been gunned down while trying to persuade people that he was right. And the act of evil perpetrated against him is an act of evil that was perpetrated against America and against our highest ideals in furtherance of an evil, the violence. Violence begets violence. And we look at a democracy that's 250 years old, the independence of the United States. And we think about Donald Trump inciting violence at the Capitol on January 6th. And we know that hundreds of police officers were assaulted, but the violence was dismissed. The violent criminals were pardoned and set loose. And now they will be ready for their war. We know that a week ago, upon the celebration of the destruction of a speedboat off of Venezuela, the 11 human beings aboard, when it was pointed out to J.D. Vance that he lacked the authority, the legality to order a lethal strike there, he responded with, "I don't give a shit." The erosion that we have seen taking place in the talk about killing and death and the escalation in rhetoric. There is no voice that has ever been in the history of the United States has done more to court violence in the 20th and 21st century between us as a people than Donald Trump, than the MAGA movement, constantly dividing, calling out to the American people that we're each other's enemies. And the answer to this hatred is etched in granite at the memorial of Dr. Martin Luther King in Washington and in Atlanta, and in the permanence of the record that makes clear that defeating hate requires the application of love, and the love of country and the ideas and ideals that we hold dear about freedom, about liberty, the rule of law, are the answer to the great crisis at hand, the solution to the American crisis at hand, and the only moral method of opposition and resistance to it. And the man who shot Charlie Kirk tried to assassinate today his country, tried to assassinate the rule of law, tried to assassinate a human being because he didn't like his politics. And he thought, in all of his sickness, in all of his arrogance, that he had the fucking right to be the judge and the jury and the executioner, and let every single one of us make clear our contempt and our disassociation and our demand that when we stand together, we do it with nonviolence as patriots. This is madness and insanity. Earlier today, I shared a story about a Life magazine that I've written about, and it's from November of 1938. And on the cover of that magazine is a toddler. And there's a cupcake with two candles. And I've always made the point, then and now, the media believes the news is about the media. The evidence, of course, that upon the second anniversary of Life magazine, with all that was going on in the world, the thing that was on the cover was the second anniversary of Life magazine. But inside the cover were the first images of the events that we remember as the Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, which followed the assassination of a Nazi official in Paris. And the act of collective revenge and punishment spilled out all over the Jews. And those pictures are in that Life magazine. And you turn the story, and accompanying those pictures for publication were the first publicity photos of the occasion of Hermann Göring's niece's christening. And you see Hitler and you see Göring together in the church with the children surrounding them. And you see a ad in the next pages for Coca-Cola telling the American people to relax and to take it easy. During the hours and the days ahead, this terrible crime will be the foundation, the basis, to say that there is a cure for the disease that we just witnessed, that there is a type of justice that can be restorative, and that justice is to give power to Donald Trump, and for Donald Trump to use the power of the state to avenge this terrible crime against who? The criminal and the assassin, or against all of Donald Trump's opponents. And so we will hear now from the people who changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. Those people who talk about lethality and violence and fetishize it and have divided the American people and told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand ready, and have said that the country has been invaded and that we are at war. Well, they have their Reichstag fire now. And that's what this will become. The justification for the expansion of state power to suppress political dissent in the name of punishing the side of a political proposition from which this murderous scumbag came. And it is important to understand that we must deplore the violence. We must pray for Charlie Kirk. We must pray for our country. But we cannot submit to the abuses of power that will be asserted on the basis of this terrible crime. Our children are not safe in their schools. We live in a country that glorifies this insanity on billboards and with a gun shop on every corner. And the rhetoric, the cold civil war that Donald Trump has stoked for many years, a decade, is flashing red, flashing hot on the periphery, turning violent. And violence is a cancer on a democracy. No democratic nation debates issues with a rifle. And fascism rose in the 1930s, not because it was strong, but because democracy was weak. And in this country, if we are to descend into extremist left-wing violence versus right-wing violence, I have bad news for every left of center person who believes in democracy. In America, in the United States, in that fight, the dominant faction is the fascist side, and it will win, it will prevail. The ideas that we must stand for require us to have the bravery to embrace nonviolence and the wisdom to reject hatred. If you know people who cannot see the humanity of Charlie Kirk, young father, those people are the worst of the worst, just like the worst of the worst that so many of us in opposition to this are so fiercely against. And so, terrible day, an awful moment, an act of political terror on the eve of September the 11th, 24 years on the eve to the day of a day that will live in infamy as a fascist curtain descends on our country, as masked agents and the military is threatened to be deployed into the streets. The man who picked up the rifle, the sick individual, is responsible for his actions, his crimes. And he is an enemy of the United States. He is a domestic enemy of the Constitution of the United States, and he stole something from all of us today that he had no right to take from any of us. But we must also consider causations, and we must remember that just days ago, an American president pictured himself as the Robert Duvall character from Apocalypse Now, ready to wage war on an American city. And there are unbalanced and sick people out there. When the president of the United States declares that his enemy is the American people, the sickness manifests itself. And the violence that is coming and the violence that has already happened should cause the deepest of reflection. And for those of you out there who say, fuck Charlie Kirk and all the sycophants, what I say to you as Ken Goldsmith is, no, Ken, you're the worst of the worst. The people who are cheering for the assassins, for the violence, are just as responsible as MAGA for taking your country from you. And what I want you to understand tonight is something that Robert Kennedy said a long time ago. What we need in America is not more hate, but we need more love. And let everybody be resolved that no matter what, we reject the idea that the government has the right to avenge this evil by attacking the American people.
I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning. I invite you to join this community where I promise to be honest, blunt, and direct about what is happening in this country. America is in crisis. Follow and subscribe to this channel and on Substack. Thank you.